What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Detroit Lions podcast. Pause. This is Bischoff and Brown here. I'm Russ Brown. That's Scott Bischoff. And we're back after a Monday night, a very successful Monday night. Scott, how are you?
I am doing great. It's good to be with you. Looking forward to the little bye week action, non-action that we have. Comes at a great time. We'll get into that. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm good. Yesterday was slow rolling for me. Late Monday night.
What were you doing late Monday night?
I was not intending to drink the amount of beers I had, but I was downtown Ford Field with the fine folks that support the Lions, and 60,000 strong there. And I think we blew the roof off a little bit. It was cool. They had like the reader of, the decibels and all that stuff. And like the average was like 116 according to whatever they flashed. And then all of a sudden at times we'd hit like 118 and a half and 119. And I'm like, I've been to a lot of Lions games in the past. I haven't been in like 10 years. For some of the reasons I stated before. But yeah, it was cool, man. Took my kid. His best friend was with us. His buddy's dad was with us. It was all good. And I'd never seen so many people at a Lions game before, and I'd never heard it so loud in my life. So I think, obviously Monday night has something to do with that, but being a good football team again certainly plays that part. But just a dominating performance for Detroit. They win on Monday night, 26-14. That's where we're going to jump in. We'll get into some of the bye week trade deadline stuff. We'll talk a couple of prospects for you guys as well, because there's bye week. There's nothing to really preview this weekend. We'll worry about the Chargers next week, and we'll get started for that next week. But big win, 26-14, double-digit victory. It got a little close for a minute, but outside of that pick six from Jared Goff, which just a great defensive play, outside of that, this game wasn't close. The Lions absolutely dominated the Raiders in every aspect of a football team and every aspect of a football game. In the trenches, offense, defense, it didn't matter what they did. The Lions just rolled. And I loved what I saw. I rewatched the game live. I rewatched the live broadcast, I should say. I rewatched the All-22 already. I was at the game. So I've seen it 3 times, and it's just like, man, it was a beautiful performance. Even if the play calling in the first half down near the red zone was a little shaky, but I think that's just Lions getting creative. I think that was Ben Johnson trying to do a little bit too much. But what was your takeaway from this game? That's kind of a broad question, I guess, or a very bland question, but what were some of your takeaways?
Well, I think the takeaway is exactly what you just said, was a little bit of, let's try this, right? This is the team to try this with. You don't want to kick a bunch of field goals. You'd like to be more efficient in the red zone, but in this particular game, it's okay. I liked how, now I don't know how it looked in person, and it's always a great perspective to see things in person because it's so different than watching on TV and watching the All-22. But they blitzed a lot. They blitzed a lot on Monday, and there were times where they left. Like Cam Sutton was on an island a bit with Devontae Adams, and he did get beat a little bit. But again, with this particular team and that court and Jimmy Garoppolo, if you just give him a hint of pressure, right? Like, okay, he's not the same. He's just not the same guy. So I like that they brought pressure from different places. I thought Lee McNeil looked really good. Not surprised. I think he's a very good player. But pressure from different places, and it was cool to see. Amon-Ra's ridiculous. Jahmyr Gibbs was awesome.
Yeah,
just like stringing together the good stuff, the not so good stuff. I don't think there was a bunch of not so good stuff. I think that when you're playing, a different O-line combination again, and you don't have your Pro Bowl center, neither of your starting guards, and you do what they did running the ball conventionally. Gibbs looked really good running the ball between the tackles. Mm-hmm. I just, again, a dominant performance, but much needed. Even with some adversity, with a bunch of players that aren't regular starters for them, and they look good. The Goff play still has me a little bit confused. Like, so in person, what did that look like? Because to me, it looked like he was trying to throw the ball away.
Yeah, from what it looked like, he just was a little bit too late on turning to his right on that read. And then he just delivered a late ball. And I think it was one of those where it was just the timing wasn't there between him and the receiver, and the defender jumped the route and took it to the house. But when he looked to the right, because if I remember correctly, he was kind of looking towards the middle or maybe a little bit more to like the left. And then all of a sudden he flips to the right and he slings it. And when it left his hand, I saw the defender and I go, oh no. And like, just in your head, you're like, drop it. What
do you think was going on in his brain at that moment?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like when the ball left his hand, that was like the quietest the stadium had been all night. Like pin could drop and you could hear it. And it was just like, okay, well, here we go. And, they responded and they came back and they got the points back and they did exactly what they needed to do. Their ability to run the football is legit, no matter who's running the ball. It could be Gibbs, it could be Montgomery, it could be the combination. Craig Reynolds ran the ball well. So
he did.
I love what I saw from Gibbs. He looked like a first rounder. That's the way he should look all the time. And I get it. It's
so
hard.
That slashing kind of stuff is what I thought. He looked like that at Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Like very much like Jamal Charles.
Yep.
Jamal Charles was awesome, but I'm talking more stylistically. Like if you get him into space, dangerous, right? And he gets into space quick on his own. How many plays were there like shoestring tackles on him in that game where, man, if he gets out of that little tackle there, he's busting one off. And having said that, he had a huge game. I think, what did he have? 180 some, 183 yards total, 4 catches, touchdown.
It's 189 yards total.
Okay. So the only thing that I feel like I'm pregnant. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, no. We don't want that.
Well, but it's this idea. Like last year they won, what were they? I don't even know. What did they finish what did they finish the season last year with? A bunch of wins, right? And 2 losses, whatever it was.
Yep.
So obviously they finished the second half or the second 2/3 of the season in very good fashion, and they were a really good football team over the last X number of games last year. And if I had prepared for this on any level, I would know this. But so
they went 8-2 down that stretch.
What's that?
They went 8-2 down that stretch.
Thank you. 8-2. See, 8-2 over their last 10 games. So obviously a very good football team over the last 10 games last year. And then you throw in, whether you like the draft or not, you throw in Jahmyr Gibbs, prominent role in week 8. You throw in Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell had a prominent role. Right? He played a lot of snaps for them in that game. Laporta is a dude, right? Brian Branch is a dude. And it's like as good of vibes as there were after last season, you've thrown those 4 guys. You have Colby Sorsdale starting for them as a rookie, looking, I would say, okay. He looked fine.
Yeah, it's a fourth-round pick, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly a developmental player, but not so far, not so big of a project that you can't play him. Yep. So, like, there's 4 guys who have taken huge roles for this team as rookies. Then you have the guard. Hendon Hooker is here. And you know what I mean? Like it's like as great as they were to finish the season, you've added, that's why I feel pregnant almost. It sounds stupid, but there is something happening here and we'll get into the trade deadline, but they have built something pretty special very quickly. And 8-2 last year, and you had four rookies who are playing serious minutes and producing for you. I mean, what is there negative to even think about at this point? I think they're the number 2 team in the NFC.
Yeah.
The schedule kind of opens up for them. The bye comes at a great time. They can get healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pre-Baltimore again.
Right. I think it's more so just name value, right? Like they look at it and they're like, well, Julian Okwara is not going to get you sacks every single week. Romeo Okwara is not going to get you a bunch of sacks every week. It's I think the lack of consistency. And when you know that there's a potential trade waiting in the wings for a Montez Sweat or a Chase Young, that's where people were getting up in arms over the trade deadline, which we'll get into here in a minute. But really just kind of putting a bow on the Raiders stuff. It's just, you mentioned the defense. They brought a ton of pressure and huge props to Cam Sutton and Jerry Jacobs. I mean, Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams were 2 guys that we talked about last week that they're going to get theirs. They're going to get their 4, 5, 6 receptions in this game. No, they were both limited to 1 catch each. Myers was held to 1 target in the game.
Yeah.
And the pressure forced a bunch of bad throws, overthrows, underthrows to Devontae Adams. And it's just a masterful job by Sutton and Jerry Jacobs. And for Jerry Jacobs to get the bashing that he's been getting over the course of his career by some of the fans here, and not every fan, but certain fans, it's just very unwarranted because he's a very good corner for being undrafted, and for the amount of snaps that he gets, he plays extremely well, I think, in a lot of high pressure situations because Cam Sutton's not getting the ball targeted his way all the time. It's a lot on Jerry Jacobs being on an island, and he does really good stuff. So that's
the takeaway too, is Jacobs has kind of emerged as a player who is super important for them. And I know you thought it about the Baltimore game as soon as you saw him pop up on the injury report. It's it's a thing. You could see teams getting after Sutton in the back half of this season because they just don't want to target Jerry Jacobs.
Right.
And I could see that being a thing. Like, that's how important he is, which is, again, it's crazy to think about, but he's a baller. He just plays. He just makes plays. It's impressive. Yeah. Very impressive.
Yeah. And I'll be intrigued to see what, another player that's kind of been forgotten about because he hasn't been active is Broderick Martin. He finally got some snaps this week. He got a tackle. And it's like, hey, if Isaiah Buggs can't go, cool, you got Broderick Martin out. And it's like, well, once they both get able to go, I mean, you're going to be able to rotate in and out certain pieces to the pie here. And it's going to be awesome. I mean, I think that's where they look at it. They go, look, we got Benito Jones, we got Isaiah Buggs, we got Broderick Martin, we got Josh Paschal, John Kaminsky, Aiden Hutchinson, and the Okwara bros, Charles Harris. They're pretty deep on their defensive line. Like, they have guys.
James Houston returning, hopefully.
Yeah, you have established players that have been a part of what you've been building. It's hard to give up those guys to go get a flashy name. Like, I understand the sexy value of it all, but at the same time, like, they're true to who they are. They're true to the guys that are helping them get to where they need to be. And it's just simple as that. And I loved seeing it. And I think it showed in this game against the Raiders. And I think in a lot of the wins that they've had this year, it's shown with guys that they have drafted, signed via free agency, or just developed throughout this tenure of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. They're true to what they have. And it's phenomenal. And I think that's why they've become so good so fast, because these players are given a chance and they have people believing in them, where you're not just a number. You're not just a business decision. You know what I mean? Like, it's just different. And I think it showed in this game against the Raiders. Again, 26-14, big Monday night game. Could have been a letdown spot. I understand, how can it be a letdown spot? But it's just how the NFL works sometimes. Yeah. And it wasn't. They didn't let anybody down. And in fact, Josh McDaniels was let go after he got his candy ass kicked by Dan Campbell. So it was cool. But the next day, trade deadline stuff, only move the Lions make is Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver out of the Cleveland Browns, former Michigan Wolverine, played at Cass Tech, pretty familiar with the area, diehard Lions fan, I would have to assume, and he comes home. Your takeaway on the trade, did you expect Donovan Peoples-Jones, or really an offensive mood? Were you expecting more defense? What was your thoughts here on?
I think we were all thinking defense, but when you think about, to me, he's an upgraded Marvin Jones. As far as like what Marvin Jones is, the point of him being on the roster and what he does for their offense, right? No Marvin Jones. Now you have Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think he helps in the red zone. I think he helps to clear space as a boundary, outside X receiver. He's big. He can run. He can do all those things. He's been productive in the past. It's super intriguing thinking about the bigger bodied guy and what that does. I think he's a good route runner. I think he's a reliable route runner. That's an important thing for Jared Goff for sure. Is for him to develop trust that if I'm throwing the ball to you, this is where my expectation, this is where you need to be, kind of thing. So to me, you gave up a 2025 sixth round pick for something that you didn't necessarily have on offense. Mm-hmm. The big-bodied outside receiver. I mean, you have Reynolds, but then after that, it's Amon-Ra small and smaller slot receiver. Khalif is small. Jameson is wiry, thin. So you didn't have that, right? So, I just look at it like he can return kicks. He's a backup in a variety of places. You gave up next to nothing for him, and he's something that you were missing. You didn't have on offense. And it's just another piece. It's another weapon for them on offense. What do you think of Peoples-Jones?
I'm excited about it. I mean, it's one of those guys that when we got into the summer and you kind of looked at the wide receiver room, I was looking at like different route combinations, like hitch seam concepts and guys that can take the top off the defense with vertical routes and clearing out space for guys underneath like St. Brown or J-Mo or even Gibbs, or in this case, even Laporta. And you thought, okay, maybe that guy is Marvin Jones. Maybe that's Josh Reynolds. Maybe at times it's J-Mo. And I even thought like Antoine Green would have had a role by now, but he's not developed the way that they thought. But furthermore, Josh Reynolds is limited in a sense. Like he can only do so much. Like he's a very decent number 2, number 3 receiver. Yeah. But once they lost Marvin Jones, I think they realized, okay, we need another piece to the puzzle here, because if St. Brown does go down at any point, it gets kind of thin. And when you have J-Mo, who had another drop on Monday night, if those continue and you can't get that confidence up and the rapport is not there with Goff and the trust isn't there with Goff to J-Mo, you can only do so much with St. Brown. And again, Josh Reynolds is good for 2, 3, maybe 4 receptions on a good game. But outside of that, there was a lot of limitations. You bring in a guy that had 61 receptions a season ago, over 800 yards, 3 touchdowns, almost a 45-inch vertical. Like you didn't have that previously. Yeah. Now you do. So
yeah, I think he completely balances the wide receiver room that they have.
Yeah. And the best part is it was a 6th round pick for 2025. In 2 years. Right. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. Like, no offense, like that pick's not going to matter in 2 years. And there's a good chance that they're going to get that pick back or another pick somehow, some way when they reconstruct their roster in the spring or next summer or whatever it is. So yeah, I'm fine with the move. I think it's a great move. And you take a gamble on a guy, same type of gamble they took on Denzel Mims, same type of gamble they took on Marvin Jones. I think that this pays off in a little bit of a bigger way. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up getting a 1, maybe 2-year contract at the end of the year, just simply because that's kind of the way the NFL start to work for some of these types of guys. Peoples-Jones getting a 4 or 5 year contract is going to be very rare after this season. I would be stunned. So
yeah, he's something, he adds something they didn't have.
Exactly.
And essentially, you're getting half a season from him on his current deal. We'll see what happens. It's just I know that there was a lot of frustration about Montez Sweat and Chase Young. I do think everyone has the permission to yell at me in the future when I fret about what the Lions are doing or what's happening, or I show some like I question what they're doing or whatever it is. The Lions are going to play more meaningful games than Monday night in Week 8, and more meaningful than Week 4 and this season. They're going to. So we can't lose our minds about them not trading for a player who may or may not help them. Yeah. Montez Sweat, I think would have been a different story, because I do think that he could have been a player that did help them. But in order to get into that conversation, you were going to have to give up your first round pick to beat Chicago's early second or top 40 second rounder.
Yep. It
sounds like Atlanta had a deal with Washington, so you were going to have to beat Atlanta's deal too, their second round pick, and they were going to extend Sweat. So that's the conversation: is did you want to give up a first round pick and sign him? And the answer should be no to those things. If you want to sign him in the offseason, cool, you can. He's going to be a free agent. That's a little bit of the confusion behind what Chicago did. As far as, and I think he would have been a fine fit for what they are and where they are. As far as Chase Young goes, the injury history with Chase Young is significant. He's been good this year, but has he been good enough to trust him going forward? I don't know. And his injury history and maybe what you would say freelancing a touch as a player, I'm not sure that he's a fit, right, specific to what the Lions locker room looks like. So I know that, yes, San Francisco went out and got him, and it's frustrating to see the Eagles and the 49ers make moves where they bolster their teams. But I'm not sure that Young is a player that, Washington let him go for a compensatory third round pick. That's really nothing. And that's all San Francisco was willing to give up for him. That's telling. I don't know what your thoughts are there, but, that's kind of the trade deadline to me. They didn't give up anything in the future. They kind of they're rocking with what they have. Would have been great for them to make a splash and trade for Max Crosby? Sure. Not available. Or Devontae Adams. I don't even think it sounds like those guys were busy firing dudes. They weren't available to talk to. Did we want Brian Burns? Of course, but Carolina had already turned down multiple first round. I think it was the Rams who offered multiple firsts and a third for him. Yep. That's a lot.
But even then, we had spoke last week on it. We said Brian Burns wasn't going to get dealt.
Yeah.
If you have a franchise type player that doesn't have a lot of injury concerns, doesn't have a lot of baggage off the field, you're not trading them specifically for second or third round picks.
No.
And I get it. They were potentially offered multiple first, but even then, you're not going to give up that type of player because you're trying to win now and you have a potential franchise quarterback in Bryce Young. And we can go down that whole rabbit hole with Carolina, but I want to turn back to Montez Sweat and Chase Young because those were the realistic options. We knew they were getting dealt. We didn't think both of them were getting dealt.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with Montez Sweat on spotrac.com, or I don't even know how to say the website, but if you go to his market value, it's calculated that he's going to get a 4-year deal at $102 million. So that's $25.5 million per year. You bring up a great point. You're going to have to find a way to beat the deal of Chicago of right now, the projected 35th overall pick, which keep in mind, they've done this early second round trade for, which was the 32nd overall pick a few years ago for Chase Claypool. That didn't work out.
Yeah.
So they're giving up early draft picks for guys that are no longer on the team. The same could be said here with Montez Sweat. Did you want the Lions to do that? Did you want them to part with the 28th or 29th or maybe even the 32nd overall pick of the draft? I know I wouldn't have, because I don't know if Montez Sweat was going to be here or not, because waiting in the wings is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Got to pay him. Jared Goff, you know you're going to have to pay him. Aiden Hutchinson eventually. You're going to have to start the framework for that deal.
Jonah Jackson.
Yeah. Jonah Jackson. And that's the other thing. Jonah Jackson's not under contract. Big V's probably done after this year. Graham Glasgow's only on a 1-year deal. He's done after this year. You're going to need interior offensive line help. Is it smart to give up assets to go get a player like Montez Sweat or Chase Young because of right now, because you think we're going to win a Super Bowl? Because guess what happens if they don't win the Super Bowl and they don't have the draft capital? Now they're a bunch of idiots because they traded for guys that aren't going to be here. So
yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. There was an element of, I guess they don't think they're competing this year because they didn't make one of these deals. And I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, they're 6-2, so they're not making the deal. They're 6-2. They go to the bye week, and now when they get back because they didn't trade for a defensive end, they're done. That's how we operate now. They can't win without those guys now.
So that's why I started this with a little bit of we all need to buckle up.
Yeah,
because I don't know if we can remember back to the Red Wings back in the early 90s, early to mid 90s when they were starting to get over the hump. It wasn't all smooth sailing. They lost at times and they won at times too, but we all got to buckle up. They're going to play very stressful games. They just are. And clearly they're comfortable with what they have. Mm-hmm. Now, injuries are going to suck. Injuries are coming. That's happening. It's one of those things where, they're coming. So in the end, I would have loved Sweat to have been here. That'd have been great. Not at that price though.
Right.
Right. And Chase Young, I don't know. I mean, this is year 4 for him. There's been a lot of injuries and a lot of he just hasn't lived up to, to his draft billing. But I understand the other side of it too, that it's just a 3rd round pick and it's a late 3rd round pick. I get it. Do you want to pay him if he gets, this best case scenario, you make that move. Chase Young comes here. He gets you a bunch of sacks in the final 9 games and you feel an obligation to pay him, and boom, injuries come back.
Yep.
And it looks like a bad decision. And it's only a good decision, really, if you win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't know if Chase Young was, as a player by himself, is enough to propel them ahead of these other teams anyway. So to me, it's kind of like, did these other teams really help themselves all that much? I don't know.
I mean, for Montez Sweat going to the Bears, okay, cool. Enjoy your 6-11 record or 7-9 or whatever you're going to be. Cool. Good for you. It's all good. Chase Young, okay, you go to a great spot. It's awesome. You're playing, with Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave. And I understand, in 2017 and 2018, when Bosa and Young, when they were together, they had 170 total plus pressures together. They had 42 sacks together. Like, I get all of it. I understand all of it. But with Chase Young, like, the big thing that I have is the way I'm looking at the timeline for him, is it sure looking pretty similar to Jadeveon Clowney 2.0.
Yeah.
And that's the first name that pops up when you look at it. Year 4, Clowney in 2017, his career high was 9.5 sacks. The very next year, he had 9 sacks. Then he was dealt to Seattle. He had 3 sacks. Then he goes to Tennessee, 2 years with Cleveland. Now he's in Baltimore. He seems to be doing okay in Baltimore, but are you really going to give up the draft capital that you might need now and potentially giving a guy $17 to $20 million as a contract for Jadeveon Clowney 2.0? I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't. That's just not the way I would operate.
And then, I think about him as a run defender, and it's all right. If you're San Francisco, you are loading up.
Yeah,
but teams like the Lions and Philly are set up to kind of run through a team like San Francisco, just running the ball on offense. Now, whether they are able to stop, the 49ers, on defense is a whole other story. But I don't know that Young helps you as a run defender. And I don't know, truthfully, he should give you some as a pass rusher, but this is where we have to trust in what the Lions are telling us when they come out and, we traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's a great fit for us in our room. And, when they talk about or don't talk about a player like Chase Young, there's a reason.
Yeah.
We know what the reason is. It's not necessarily a culture fit. So yeah. I don't think expecting them to bring in a player who might not be a great fit for them is what they're currently into. The build that they've set in motion has been, it's been expedited with what they've added in the draft and in free agency and that kind of stuff. But I don't think there's any desperation to add anything to it. Just to add something to it, right? I don't know that Young would help them. Clearly, he would help them, but how much? It's a different story, and we don't know totally all of the backstory about all of it anyway. So it's just hard. It's hard to see how upset some people were. It's not hard. It just was confusing to see how upset some people were. You're 6-2. You're the number 2 team in your conference. Going into the bye, getting healthy, schedule kind of opens up where it's like, things should go really well in the back half of the season. I wouldn't think that they should be, upsetting things by adding a player.
No, and keep in mind, Chase Young goes to a football team where you have a better record than. You just got to win the majority of your games here down the stretch, and you finish with a better record, and it's all good. Right now, the 49ers kind of look broken. They're 5-3. Brock Purdy's kind of starting to show his true self a little bit. And, Debo's not.
Some of that turnover luck is going the other way for sure.
Yeah. Debo's banged up. CMC's a little bit banged up. Trent Williams is banged up.
It doesn't strike you as a move of not desperation, because it's not like they gave up much anyway, but it does feel like a swing. What do we have to lose? Let's take a swing.
Right.
Maybe they're in a position to do that. I don't know.
And I think when you look at a team like San Francisco, I think they have a window, right, of winning all these games and making a run. The same for the Buffalo Bills. I think there's a window. Like, are they going to be good and competitive for a while? Absolutely. There's too much young talent, and there's too much of a glue there in the core of your team to where you aren't going to be good. But, if Purdy, again, starts showing his true self, he starts having these costly turnovers, you start losing these football games, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think with Detroit, they're going to be just fine. They're going to be just fine. They're very winnable games down the stretch. They're going to just take it one game at a time, and it is what it is. So, that's it for the trade deadline stuff for me. We can go back and forth on Chase Young and Sweat and all that. And it's great. It's good banter. I get why people are upset. And at the same time, I don't understand why you're upset, but it is what it is. We're a 6-2 football team. We've got a winnable schedule in the second half. We're pushing for a home playoff game, which would be absolutely wild, which is what I was saying pre-show. If the Lions get a home playoff game with how the atmosphere was on Monday night, holy moly, I could not imagine what a playoff game on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon would be like here in this city. And that's just got to be the goal right now. That's got to be the end goal here. Try to go 6-2 in this second half of the season. And
think about like potentially even 2 home playoff games.
Dude, it'd be nuts.
Yeah.
And you could be in a position of maybe run the table and have them all here. You don't know. If you get the first round bye, you never know what's going to happen. So
yeah.
I love what we're doing. I love how it's looking. Good bounce back win against the Raiders. But
yeah, for sure.
With the bye week, normally we would jump into a little preview here of the next opponent. We'll worry about the Chargers next week. Right now, it's a little draft talk. We wanted to sprinkle this in. We know in the coming weeks, we're going to probably add an episode to the show and do, some draft stuff here and there, maybe a 20, 30 minutes at most, and just start prepping you guys for what is going to happen after the season. But with that, the Lions are projected right now to be the 28th or 29th pick of the draft. So
it feels really weird, doesn't it? Because we don't have to focus on 1 or 4 guys.
Exactly. Like right now, we're not worried about Brock Bowers or Caleb Williams or Joe Alt from Notre Dame or any of these top prospects. We're worried about some of the guys that are borderline first rounders or early second round picks. But swinging to you, I mean, there's a couple of intriguing names in the back end of the first round that I'm very much intrigued with. I'm going to butcher a couple of names when I get to mine, but who are maybe a 2 to maybe 3 players that you're really intrigued with right now that maybe the Lions should, circle, or our fan base should circle and maybe pay attention to this Saturday coming up, because it's a great college football slate this weekend?
So maybe let's just, in the absence of naming names, and we can do that too, but there are position groups in this draft that are, if you're in a position to need a tackle if you need a tackle, this is a great draft to need a tackle.
Yeah,
it is. There are, and what feels like in the previous couple of years, there have been undersized, like Skoronski, for example, kind of fits the bill of what I'm talking about. Like, is he a guard? Is he a tackle? He's got shorter arms, kind of, who knows? There are a bunch of tackles in this coming class who are no issues with length at all. Like Joe Alt's huge. He's 6'8" with really long arms, or at least they look like long arms. Olufashanu from Penn State, I think he has like 34 plus inch arms at however big he is, and he moves crazy. It's, so, there's a bunch of guys who I think if you're in the market for a tackle, yeah, it's a great time to take one. But the back in the mid-20s, good time to take an interior offensive lineman. And Michigan's got one, their right guard. Yeah, I mean, I think you just plug and play that guy, and all right, he's gonna play for X number of years for you.
Yeah,
right. And then there are some who are playing tackle, like I think his name's Graham Barton from Duke. I hope. It's embarrassing if I get that one.
No, that's right. You're correct.
I think he may play guard in the NFL, but at a pretty high level. So it's that kind of prospect. As far as on the O-line, it's tough to know, like even right now, what position, like where could we in 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 weeks, whatever it is, where do you project, what position do you project them needing? Pass rusher is always important.
Yep. Well, and I got a pass rusher. I'm going to butcher his last name. And for fantasy pros, I have a mock draft dropping either tomorrow or the next day, depending on when it all gets kind of pushed out. But, Florida's got an edge rusher, Princely Umeneman or something like that, or Umanely or something.
Yeah.
I can't say his name. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like pull it up and how to say it, and then it just starts saying it.
I know. We'll get there with some of these guys. I mean, they're, you've got a bunch of those. UCLA's got one, Latu. Like, he's a dude. I don't know how high a player like that's going to go, because I don't think he's like super quick or explosive off the edge, but he's very productive. He's got great hands. Mm-hmm. So, I think that if we just generalize and look at positions, it's a great time to need an offensive tackle. Great draft for that. Interior O-line it's good for that. Wide receivers are loaded this year. Be a great time to take a wide receiver. Not that you want to take another one. You just took J-Mo, but think about a player like Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. I don't think he'll be there for them, but at that kind of a player, very polished route runner, super savvy player. Receivers are kind of important,
even corner. I mean, you look at the cornerback spot, there's a ton of corners in this draft, specifically where the Lions are going to be drafting. I mean, you have Nate Wiggins from Clemson, who's really intriguing, a physical press man type of corner. So for the Lions, the Lions, they run a lot of cover one. So if they run the cover one man stuff, or even a cover two man look, they could very well take another guy opposite of Cam Sutton if they want to move Jerry Jacobs inside or whatever. I mean, Wiggins has only given up 7 receptions this year. So like he could very much be maybe the best corner in this draft. I still think it's Kalen King. I know he got cooked by Marvin Harrison Jr., but he's just so athletic. I think he could very well be the top guy. Cooper DeJean from Iowa, special team guy, so fast.
Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid, yeah. Maybe the most consistent DB. Denzel Burke out of Ohio State, another guy. So, I mean, you just go down the list. There's talent in the players that they need, or we wanted them to make a trade for. There's a plethora of guys here in the draft that I think we're going to talk about more as we get closer to it and as we cycle through draft stuff.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the drafting in, say, the mid-20s is that, and I've always felt like this, like when you're in the top 10, you're taking a player based on, in a lot of ways, on their upside, and not necessarily what they've shown you on film that they can do. But hey, the traits are through the roof. A lot of them are like redshirt sophomores or juniors, so they're younger players. But when you get into the mid-20s, you're looking at the studs that come from the Senior Bowl, those guys. You're looking at players who are going to step in and be very good, reliable football players, but maybe not, Deebo Samuel went late in the 20s. It's that kind of thing. Like, you're getting a really good football player, just maybe not a player with huge upside, but a player who's going to fill a need for you right away. And I think teams that are good and draft in the mid-20s always kind of steal players in the mid-20s because in the last, as long as I can remember, it's been, okay, the Lions pick 4th on day 2, and here's a list of 10 guys I would love for them to have available to them. And, 5 of them just went in the last 5 picks of round 1 kind of thing. So it's just it's an entirely different group of players, but it's also some of these players I think give you instant return and are not players who need time. They're just ready to go. So I think this, corner, pass rusher, offensive line, either tackle or interior offensive lineman is kind of where I would be right now with them. And it's a good year to have. It's a good draft for those positions, specific to those positions.
I'm surprised you didn't hype up at offensive tackle your boy Kingsley from BYU.
Trying to slow my roll. I'm going to get into him. He would be dynamic because he is Penei Sewell's cousin. So it'd be kind of a cool thing. But I wonder if he can play left tackle or, as a guard.
And that right guard with Penei would be nasty.
Yes.
That would be nasty. But
his ability to move. Yeah.
And I'm with you. I watched him over the weekend. I've been playing a lot of catch up these last, 7, 8 days, 9 days. And I watched him a little bit over the weekend and I was like, okay, I see what Scott's talking about. And then I'm like, I think he's going to be gone by the time the Lions are picking, because you look at the teams in front of them. You got the New York Jets, potentially the Giants. Maybe they move out of that number 5 spot if that's where they end up being. I think there's teams that could use some guard tackle help. The Lions might miss out on a guy like that just simply because of the need and the overall value of what he provides. He's only like 21, I think he is, or 20, maybe even 20.
He might be 20. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a young dude, and coming out of BYU, normally those guys are like 24, 25, and this guy's 20.
He went to Oregon and was there. He was there for 1 year, and then he transferred, and this is his 2nd year at BYU. So, and I think some of the reason with him, people aren't onto him yet, is because they're not sure he's going to be in the draft.
Right.
But I think he's a seriously impactful player who would be, as a guard, the ability to move and the power he plays with. Yeah, it'd be awesome. That kind of stuff. Like, if that's the player they take on day 1 after, whatever they do in the playoffs, I'd be very excited about that. Yeah, right now it's me alone, but that's okay. We're good.
Yeah. Well, I would be for it. I always like watching the big uglies, so it's always fun. But again, we just wanted to mix some draft stuff in there, give you a couple of names to pay attention to, some position groups maybe to start studying. But again, we're not going to go heavy on the draft stuff because we're pushing for a division title for the first time since '93. We're pushing for the playoffs, and we'll see exactly kind of how this whole thing rolls. But Lions beat the Raiders 26-14. We make a trade for Donovan Peoples-Jones, basically 15 hours later, and people are up in arms about Montez Sweat and Chase Young. So we wanted to talk about it a little bit, and we wanted to throw in some bye-week filler with some draft stuff. So, Scott, you got anything else for me?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. We'll be back in a week, and then I think as the season progresses, it would be cool to do our normal weekly show, and then do another one that's just draft specific.
Yep.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, we'll get there on it, and you guys will definitely follow along and enjoy it. And if you're not following along, you guys can follow us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, at Bischoff_Scott. As always, you guys can rate, review, and subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all podcast platforms. So wherever you get your podcast, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. So we appreciate you guys joining us here on the Detroit Lions podcast. He's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. Until next week, we'll talk to you then.